Do you discriminate more on philosophy, like anti-conservative versus pro-liberal?
No. Our policies and our algorithms don't take into consideration any affiliation, philosophy, or viewpoint.
That's hard to stomach.
Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey facing tough questions from House lawmakers over claims that the social media company is biased against conservatives just hours after the Senate Intel Committee grilled him and Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg on foreign election meddling. Here now is Lance Ulanoff, tech expert, and Dan Gaynor, Media Research Center Vice President. Good to see you both. So, Dan, Dorsey says he doesn't discriminate against viewpoints. Do you have any evidence that he's wrong?
Well, of course we have evidence that he's wrong. We have examples of advertising discrimination. Just ask the live action people. Lila Rose was tweeting out during the hearing that, of course, they've not been allowed to advertise. We've seen, Twitter, this whole idea of algorithms. If you take this out of this debate here, you can find every liberal, every major tech publication will admit algorithms can be biased. Why is it so difficult when you hear countless examples of conservatives complaining they're being discriminated against on the accounts when Candace Owens retweets almost an identical version of what Sarah Jeong does, and she gets suspended for it briefly? We know this is happening. It beggars belief that he says it's not.
Lance, another place where algorithms are used, and some people say politically used, is with Google. But Google wasn't at this meeting. Why not?
Yeah, well, they didn't want to send their top person. They basically wanted to send a lieutenant, and that was rejected. So Google made the choice, which probably wasn't a great idea, of not showing up because, the best way to defend yourself against misinformation is to offer the information in person. And Sheryl Sandberg and Jack Dorsey spent hours in front of the Senate committee, and then Jack is right now still in front of the House committee, and they're doing a great job of really just explaining. And by the way, I wouldn't discount algorithms. I mean, your other guest makes it sound as if algorithms are something, it's a little bit of salt you put in there. No, the algorithm is a deeply programmed thing. And Jack talked about peer review, internal peer review on biases. And it's honestly, that's just not how Twitter works. And it's kind of complicated.
On the other hand,
wait a second.
Hold on, Dan. On the other hand, the algorithms, a lot of people who use Google for research, et cetera, notice that there have been changes in the algorithms, and Google has admitted it, more so, I think, than the other two, that in fact what they do now is place the mainstream media publications first, maybe not the best or most relevant to the search request, but it is a preference for mainstream media to come first.
It's a preference for actual news. So the thing is, if they're
it's a question of how you define news these days.
But think about what you're saying, because if you think about when they're trying to prioritize just somebody who says, I saw something happening on the street, as opposed to Fox News saying this happened, then you want to prioritize Fox News because Fox is a news agency. So there is a reason.
That would really be wonderful if the recent study, wait a second. That would really be wonderful if the recent study we're actually talking about reference Fox News. In fact, the links to Fox appeared almost not at all in this study. This wasn't a conservative study. This was done by researchers. They came up with the top 5 links that were consistent to 5 companies.
Wait, hold on. One at a time. Let Dan finish, and then you go ahead, Lance. Go ahead, Dan.
The top 5 that appeared repeatedly in this study, 49% of the links, the top 5 were all liberal outlets: CNN, Politico, HuffPost, New York Times, Washington Post.
Okay.
The remainder of the top 14
let me give Lance a chance to come in here.
liberal.
What about that, Dan? The fact that a lot of the publications that are mainstream happen to have a liberal tint.
I mean, look, I'm not going to get into how these news organizations slant or don't slant the news, but you have to understand that Twitter is a lot of programming, and what everybody sees something slightly different. Your Twitter feed doesn't look the same as someone else's Twitter feed. It doesn't look the same as mine. And all of those signals that come into it are one of the reasons that sometimes you will see different views of the same news story because you've maybe prioritized. When you see at the top of Twitter, you see it like a feed. Maybe I see the Mets at the top. Why? I'm a Mets fan. Other people don't see that. So there's Are there any Met fans out there? But
there are.
You have to understand that it's more complicated than that. It is not a bunch of editors, human editors sitting around choosing.
At the same time, programming originates with individuals, and individuals do have personal preferences, and it's hard to keep them out, those preferences entirely, right, Dan?
People are policy. Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg both admitted that that their staffs are very liberal. We're supposed to accept that this black box algorithm that is based on, Jack Dorsey's now talking about healthy conversation, shared facts, all sorts of things that we've got to guess what they mean.
We got a whole lot of facts this hour, and because of that, I'm going to have to cut it short. We didn't even talk about whether there's going to be any kind of regulation, which scares the heck out of me, regulating speech.